Thank you everyone for being here. Quite an honor. So we had this idea prepared for quite a while, and so happy that we have so many people now in the room. Before we really get started, we, for legal reasons, have to show this antitrust policy. There might, and I think there are competitors here in the room, which is fine. We just have to behave. And these are the rules, and they're also on the Linux Foundation antitrust policy side. So I'll let this sink in for some seconds, and then we can get fully started. So the rough agenda for today is we'll start with some overview about the open source idea in general, try to see how the EVerest open source project is applying to EV charging, and then tailor it to the CPO Forum idea. So why are we doing this here today? And there will be, I think, at least half an hour interactive area where I need all your help. So there will be some Excalibur, so like mural board, where I would love to collect input from you, especially from the CPOs here in the room. So, but let's get started. The following slides about open source, very quick recap, stole this from Linux Foundation Energy. If you just imagine 3-4 companies doing the same but slightly different, then their technology stack is the same, but on the top slightly different in principle. But they all develop and engineer the same things. What about just sharing the foundation and sharing the investments on top of that? So open source is basically digital R&D collaboration on non-competitive parts of what everyone is doing. And that can accelerate your R&D a lot. It can save costs. It can drive interoperability really, really up, and actually creates also long-term maintainability, which, especially for long-living assets like EV chargers, is, I think, very, very crucial. And we're not the first ones inventing this. If you look around, that happened in phones, cars, clouds, stock exchange, nuclear submarines, like everyone is doing that. And yeah, for example, if you look on phones, all of them starting with Linux on the bottom and Android on top, Java, and then you might have different editions. And if you also look on the most expensive companies in the world, all of them are driving open source. So this is, it scales with tech. Why are we doing EVerest? So my favorite reason for this, I think there's multiple reasons, is the screenshot from, I think, Monta. Kaspar did that some months ago, where he ranked the top EV charging vendors. And even the best vendor had like 10% failure rate. And the top 3 had 14%. And I mean, you all know the numbers from your network. This is not a situation where we want to be in. And if we scale that up to a billion of vehicles with a complex supply chain, with a lot of different vehicle types, a lot of different charging station types, backing system types, and yeah, apps, and also deploy globally billions of EV chargers, this situation wouldn't get better automatically. So the issues, at least we saw from all the interviews and discussions we had, is intercompatibility between chargers and cars, between chargers and backend systems, and maybe chargers and different power grid APIs. This is, I think, now a hot topic coming. That's not getting easier automatically, especially if you have your billion of different combinations easily in such a diagram. Then maintenance is hard, getting the right asset, finding out what component is broken, getting the right component at the right time to the right location, ideally slightly before it breaks. Stranded assets. I mean, this is quite a difficult landscape. So if you charge a vendor, go bust. And what are you doing with those assets if there's no one there who can maintain the software? And I think then in general, software quality is hard. And I think it could be better, especially if we do it together. And the entire idea of the EVerest project is taking this landscape and transforming it to a shared code base across different vendors, because that will bring down complexity of the ecosystem dramatically. And if you have just one single counterpart to test your backends against, to test all your cars against, or if there's a car, then they know, like, okay, all those EVerest chargers will behave very much the same. This will reduce testing and compatibility costs for all of us a lot. And if you do that open source, even though this thing might look like a monopoly, it is not an evil monopoly, because everyone can do whatever they want. There's no strings attached. And this is exactly what the EVerest project is driving. And another angle, how people are currently trying to solve all of these problems, is standardization. This is a rough diagram. I think in my background there's a bigger one, of all the standards in EV charging, and it just adds up over time. And the problem is, for EV charger vendor, there's little benefit in invest here. Maybe you get some benefits if you're the first one to implement OCPP 2.01, or if you got forced by legislation. But at the end of the day, all of those boxes here are standards, and by definition, you can't be special by implementing them. And at the same time, there's not even agreement which standard is now the right one. So we see war on standards, we see slow adoption, so in order of decades sometimes. We see a lot of waste of resources, like everyone implements the same stuff. And worst of all, everyone implements it slightly different. So we have OCPP in hundreds of flavors. There are other methods to bring this down, but one method to bring this down is a shared code base. And that's what we want to drive here with EVerest. And yeah, so we not want to be a new standard. So this is my favorite cartoon about that. We think if we just adding a new standard to the game, we will make it worse. So our vision and mission we're driving here is others can make standard. We don't want to interfere with them. We want to help them by being a playground, by being a suggestion giver. But we just want to have one consistent implementation of all of those standards in an interoperable way. And so that's the one stack to charge them all. And if you look on what happened out of EVerest, I think the project is now unofficially 5 years old. We grew, I think, this is even too small already. We have now more than 80 organizations contributing here, more than 650 developers contributing here. We have people from the charging station makers, we have OEMs, we have sanitization body people, we have governments, we have universities here, we have some CPOs already working on this, and we have a lot of component manufacturers. All of that under the umbrella of the Linux Foundation / Linux Foundation Energy. And if you look on the numbers, so the estimated worth of this open source project, EVerest, now is being in place, is 700 million US dollars. Comparing that to the Linux kernel, this is more than half a Linux kernel. So we are really one of the, I think, biggest clean tech open source projects, at least according to the Linux Foundation database, which is, I think, has a couple of thousand projects in it. And then also, if you look on the deployed chargers in the field with EVerest installed, I think over the last years, we always grew something like 40x each year. I guess we can't do that for much longer because otherwise we will have more chargers with EVerest than chargers in total. But it's really, really catching up. And especially if you think about this embedded software development cycles, that takes a while. And EVerest is now really reaching the field. And you can also see on the international map, this is a European and US project. It's really intercontinental and policy. Quick review about the tech side. So what is EVerest technically? We are not a CPMS. We are the firmware running within the EV charger. So OCPP, ISO 15118, -2, -20, the DIN spec, a lot of hardware drivers, communication with the Linux, with the payment system, with home energy management system, with the grid operator. All of that in a consistent way is implemented in EVerest. License cost is free. Everyone can just use it. We have a very, very industrial-friendly license with the Apache 2.0. It's hosted by a non-profit organization. So there are rules in place that no one from us could go rogue and push the others to something they don't want to do. So this is consensus driven within the people who steer and lead this. And there's a lot of guardrails in place because Linux Foundation has a lot of experience how to govern open source projects, and we inherited from them. Yeah, and if you look one level deeper, I don't want to go much deeper than this. EVerest is super, super configurable. It's basically a framework where you can load different modules like a driver for an RFID card reader, OCPP control module, authentication module, different energy management nodes. So I think there's 100 more nodes. You can wire them up graphically. You can configure each node. And end of the day, it will all end up in a big text file, configuration file for the nerds here in the room. And with that, we have super cheap single port AC home chargers out there, which you can buy in the supermarket for $500. But we're also running on literally the biggest charging DC HPC sites in the world. So EVerest can do all of that. And because of this flexibility. And if you look on who's part of this ecosystem or who already works with it, on the silicon vendors, we have all the relevant silicon makers. At least those are the ones I can name now, who work on embedded CPUs in those chargers, work with a couple of controller vendors, and also there are more behind the scenes, which I'm now preparing to become public, work with a lot of component makers from power meters, Eichrecht, isolation monitors, payment terminals, power supplies, all of that. And yeah, we're also working with a lot of charger makers. And I guess the unofficial number might be 3 times higher than what I'm listed here, because a few of them just want to stay silent with their use of EVerest until they make a big public announcement. But there are fleets of a couple of thousand chargers of single types in the field out there, which run EVerest really, really successfully and are not listed here so far. Yeah, and if you look on the other things which are relevant for a charger, but not really in a charger, that's a CPMS. And you see here on the left side the list of backend systems we have already tested against until we stopped collecting the names. We have Steve even here in the room now, and I guess also a couple of other CPMSs. I think I saw Virta. And we also now one of the first golden system under tests from the Open Charge Alliance. That means the official certification test tool from the Open Charge Alliance will get pre-tested against EVerest before this test tool is released. So in a way, we are the tester for the official tester for OCPP, or one of those very few. And on the car side, we also have a big list, and we also stopped collecting names after a while. We're in all the festivals, and we have this crowdsourced testing exercise with all the partners out there. And we even have testing devices based on EVerest, which now several OEMs are using in their labs to test their prototype cars. So also here, if such a stack becomes a critical volume, everyone tests against you, and actually you don't have to test so much yourself. And that's definitely the case with EVerest. Quickly about the organization behind it. How is it steered politically? First of all, we are part of the Linux Foundation Energy. This is the legal entity where EVerest belongs to. And you can imagine Linux Foundation like what's it called, alliance as a service in the energy field. They're hosting different projects from let's say power grid control to behind the meter energy orchestration to grid modeling. So a lot of things energy related. EVerest is the biggest one here. And you see they're offering neutral management, training, and a lot of things around. But let's dive into EVerest. So as I said, Linux Foundation Energy here on the left side is part of the Linux Foundation. And within EVerest, we also have quite some substructure. We have our technical steering committee where I'm the chair of. We have a security task force, the vulnerability management team, and we have different working groups for car communication of chargers, for cloud communication, a lot of other things. And the newest working group, so to say, is the CPO Forum, so where we are here today, and you would love to kick that off, that also the CPOs have a say in the structure and can guide and guard the development of this project. But also another perspective on how we see the EVerest ecosystem. In the center, our code is for the EV charger makers. So yes, they have to install it on their machines. It's really hard to make a charger, an EVerest charger, without the help of the OEM. On the other hand, sure, you can hack it in. There's also a lot of things for them to win. So they can focus on their USP. They don't have to waste money in commodity. But also there's other personas, like we're working with the former, actually also the new US government on EVerest. They sponsored quite a bit of the engineering in the initial phase and also still doing testing and things like that. And they just want to get things working in the field as fast as possible. In their opinion, open source project as EVerest can help there. We are working with the engineers, with the big open source community, giving them some free tools so they don't have to code all the annoying stuff. We're working with the supply chain from all the component makers. What's their motivation? So think about if you try to sell a printer, but you can't ship a printer driver, it's really hard for your customers to print something. But if you can bundle a printer driver with your printer, or in their language, a power module driver with a power module, then it's way easier to sell. And in this way, we're kind of bringing the coding work to the place where it belongs and makes it just more and more fluent. And now, last but not least, charge point operators. That's where this is about today. Let's dive there in a second. So the CPO Forum. So why and why now? So you saw EVerest is now one of the very large open source projects overall globally. I think in one statistic, I think we ranked 30th. Still a bit unbelievable for us, but let's say it's not going bad. We think it can solve most of the standard tasks with an EV charger. We have the first roughly 400,000 chargers in the field deployed, ramping 40x year to year. We work with dozens of vendors, and we see that almost all the component makers are already on board. We see that many academia partners, sanitization groups, and government alliance on the board, but the CPOs are missing. And we would like to create something where also they can have a say on the table, because end of the day, you have to suffer from what others are coding, so you should have a say in this. Yeah, we want to make this for public and open, so all other vendors can also join this. We want to adopt basically the classical concept of a user group. Yeah, aligning collaboration. We think there's, beside the vendor benefits, I think, which are, let's start with the CPO benefits. We think you should have this direct voice in the community. You should have early access to updates, testing results, reference configuration, reference designs for chargers. We want to bring transparency in the process, interoperability as well. And we want to share field feedback and metrics in order to improve the software, and also to see where we're doing well, where we're not doing well, end of the day, growing this ecosystem. And I think also for the vendors, there's a benefit if we bring the CPOs here to the table, because they can see real world data, can also guide their engineering and development. They can demonstrate their performance and compliance. And they can also build visibility for their products working with EVerest and maybe tap into the demand pool. So what we think so far, and this is really an open suggestion, we come to that on the next slide, how to actually refine it. We think there's need for alignment on requirements and roadmap on EVerest. We should define the KPIs and reliability and interoperability and so far. We should exchange feedback from the field, and we should also prepare collateral materials around EVerest so other CPOs or other hardware vendors can follow that. Like, what is a good EVerest-based chargers? Like, there's still a lot of degrees of freedom. We can maybe work on that, also together with other alliances like Mercury. For the format, we think there should be regular publicly hosted sessions under the Linux Foundation, like this year, maybe quarterly online, but all of that we can discuss then in some minutes. So let's head over to the discussion. Just roughly speaking, those are the companies who have registered, and I try to find out if you're a CPO or not. If you don't find yourself on the list, don't worry. I want to share a mural board in just a second where everyone can show a bit what they're doing, write a couple of sentences. But I think there's already quite a few interesting companies here. And if we get this started, so this should be the initial crystal core, and from here we can grow. So open mic, I will share this link. Also sharing it here on the screen, share this tab instead. So the first two questions I would love to discuss with you is, can maybe make a quick introduction about which organization you're representing and a very short introduction what you're doing. You can drag and drop from the top boxes, or you can just copy one. I see you're good at that. Just double click on a box and then you can change the text or add text. And second, just imagine next Christmas 2026, what would be a successful 2026 for you with the CPO Forum? So what would have defined successful? What would have made you happy? So then we can work backwards from there. And it would be amazing if you, let's make this maybe 5 minutes and then have 2 more asks to you. Okay. Next question is a bit related. Let's uncover it. So what kind of problems do you have in your charging station fleet in terms of operation, onboarding, maintenance, procurement, so everything where EVerest has a chance to influence it? I guess that's related. But I think on the left-hand side, you could also have written, oh, if I just happy exchange with my peers from different companies, that is a good outcome for you. This one is more like really like what is bad for you today. And if you're not a CPO, but a charger vendor, happy if you just writing the cost issues your customer tell you. So just imagine. So then let's remove the last overlay. Next questions. Would you be interested in driving this team or any specific subtopics? So yes, I'm here today and happy to drive this and push this through, but it don't has to be me. I'm super happy to, within this framework of Linux Foundation Energy, to give away that competency to one or several drivers. Could also be subtopics, like someone is driving certain subtopics. Then how much time could you imagine to invest in such a topic from you? And what kind of working model would you prefer? Like what kind of formats? Online meeting, maybe sometimes in face-to-face, maybe collaborative working on Google Docs together. What kind of cadence do you think would be appropriated? So if you want to solve and do all of them on the left-hand side, how do we get there? And could you help? And here would really be good if you indicate your name in the bubbles, or at least the company. Just see David from Amazon writing here about the Meta team. I had been in contact with the Google Meta team and the Apple Meta team. So I think if we have now 3 Meta teams, I'm pretty confident one way or another we get Meta going. And I think that would be amazing extension for EVerest. Actually, on 2 sides, it's really good for commissioning charges, vendor agnostic. And second, it's a behind the meter energy orchestration protocol. At least it's getting there. And I think this could be really 2 interesting aspects of Meta. Especially for really cheap chargers which don't have a display, like how to get them into the Wi-Fi, and Meta has solved that cross-device classes. But let's see. I think Monta also was quite interested in getting Meta into EVerest, so maybe there's even more people interested in that. I think we're more or less done with writing. Maybe going back on my suggestion slide, sharing it right now. What we tried to identify beforehand, before starting this meeting, was a lot of CPOs would love to get benchmarks. Like, okay, EVerest has this uptime, and this is the intercompatibility list, and this are the specs to get a good charger. And those kind of KPIs literally came up in every single interview. And it would be amazing if we could drive KPI collection cross-vendor. I think that would be probably more an ask to the EV charger vendors here in the room or in the other rooms. But I think if there's also from this group interest in the KPIs of average chargers in the field, I think that could underpin that and help us to collect that data. So just wondering if this is also interested. Just have not checked it in detail. Yeah. Okay. I think we're all done. Before really wrapping up, my next step would actually be I would sort through all of that here, and try to make a proposal out of that. And if you would now jump off the meeting, I'm still super interested if you help me to pull in more CPOs and vendors into this organization. If you have anything else to share with me, you can just write to the EVerest TC mailing list, or just to me personally, don't matter, it will reach its goal. And it would be amazing if you can join future session. But we have 15 minutes left, so I would actually open the microphone and happy to also get some other voices into this meeting. Anyone want to share something on this? On audio. Share this tab instead.
Hi, Marco. thank you so much for leading this and like organizing this new work group and all the amazing work on Everest.
Yes.
I wanted to ask because I never could find that because we're talking about so many Everest powered chargers in the fields, but I really cannot find a list of
Yeah.
a vendors that admit and are okay to say like, okay, our chargers are running Everest, that we could, for example, as CPOs have like a list
Yeah.
of who should we maybe buy from or start talking with.
Yeah. Yes. I know. There had been one list of one of those slides here on the right. So let's go through the logos you see here because that are the ones I can talk about. There's others you will
You are
see on this list
you are
very
not
soon.
sharing the slide at the
Oh, I'm
moment,
not
but you're
sharing.
still sharing the board.
Okay, this one. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So we have NEDEC on the DC charger side. The old Marlet chargers, Charge Big, had been with Everest. As far as I know, the new next generation will be as well. Siemens had something on the prototype products, but not on the mass products yet. Intelligent was Everest based. US Volt Post, the new. There's a logo missing. Damn it, I missed the logo. The new Enphase chargers, Everest based. Katrine, they're now bankrupt, so it doesn't help. Tomonia is building Everest-based chargers. Compleo will switch on the new products, or Costai Compleo, to Everest. Quello, they're even here in the room. Holger, you heard him in the beginning. They're Everest-based, but they're kind of a mixture of a CPO and a vendor. S-Charge, a company from India. Amplified Heidelberg, the new DC chargers will be Everest-based. I think then is Podpoint. I missed that logo here. And then there's more to this. And yeah, I'm really pushing those people to make it public. And I know there's a big dark field because some people just download Everest and install it on their chargers. For example, Katrine, we reverse engineered because you could download the firmware update on their website, can unzip that, and there was Everest README inside. So yeah. Without that, I would not have been able to allow to tell you that it's Katrine. And so this was basically public by accident. And but I'm pushing to make this bigger. And also, I think without speaking in public like now, I can also tell you a few more companies who don't want to be listed here as of today. But I think we have 2 or 3 announcements scheduled for the next months. Also, with quite some volume behind. Yeah, and then I think at least the companies I know, there's around 10 or so who are known to me who currently integrate Everest into the next generation products, but they will probably need more than a few weeks to make this an public available Everest charger. So yes, I hear you, Wojciech. I'm working on it, and there are lists. And if you call me, I can maybe tell you more. Anyone else? And thank you, Robert.
I just have one question. So, regarding the unknown vendors, is there actually a kind how we could identify charging stations using Everest? So, are there some specific spices or
So in principle, I mentioned, now this becomes technical. I mentioned to you this code license Everest is distributed under. It's called Apache 2.0. Actually, the only obligation you have as a vendor, if you use Everest, you have to follow this license, and it says like you have to state that you're using Everest. But you
Mhm.
only have to state that after you start selling. And as soon as you're not really selling, you don't have to do that. And then also it could be deeply hidden somewhere, which is
Mhm.
not really by the book, but it could be some fine print. So I think actually what we see, it's good for the vendors, and those who are selling typically also make it public. But those people who are in the preparation phase sometimes don't want to hint their competition that they're doing this.
I
But
guess in that case, like you mentioned, if it's a production device, then somewhere in there they have to provide the licenses file, and licenses file might be the concatenated all the licenses together in the same file, which like so many cases. So I guess on the list, then theoretically it should list Everest as one of those, right?
yes, exactly.
And also one more question regarding Everest. So if, for example, vendors are using currently their own stack on their devices, are they, or have you faced that it's changing all the code in a firmware update, or will they actually stick then to the complete system? So
I'm not sure if I can follow with your question. So if vendors start to use EVerest on their charging,
yeah,
then
so only, or if they only start using it with new hardware, or also with legacy, and then deploy it by a firmware update, for example.
Interestingly, initially we have, like when we started this 5 years ago, if you have asked me back then, I would say like, no, this will only go on new chargers. Why should you ever touch a product which you already got money for? Why should you spend effort on changing the firmware? But it turns out people doing that way more than we expected, because developing a product once is kind of half the work. The other half of the work is keeping the product alive over years. And if you have, I don't know, 3 or 4 different product lines with different softwares, this is 5 times the work, instead of if you can just keeping one software universal across your products. And then often people start to retrofit. And Holger is just typing here. Holger, you want to speak up? But I think the answer is yes, this now gets deployed when retrofits.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure if my audio is great. I'm in my commute right now. But we at Quello, we did both. We had the new hardware development, which was from the start EVerest based, but we also backported our old stack. Like we threw it out and basically backported the EVerest based stack from our new generations onto our old hardware. And what we also did quite a lot is we're mainly a charge point operator. We're not selling our hardware, but we actually occasionally buy large quantities of old hardware. And we did that recently in the Netherlands, where we bought 400 something chargers. And we removed the charge controller and put a EVerest-based charge controller inside of these chargers to basically make them EVerest-based chargers. So all of the above, so to speak.
Thanks.
And Holger, I'm curious, how much of an effort was it to replace the charge management software in the chargers that you bought?
It was not a ton of effort. We basically used the charge controller we are comfortable with from our new generation. And then we just devised an operational plan to go in the field and rip the existing controller out and put another one in. So it was mostly an operations-based project and building a slightly different image. So I don't know, maybe 5 weeks of work, development work, and then 3 months of operational field work, something like that. But we were not in a rush to do it, so could have gone quicker if we wanted to.
But also, I think so. Holger is building AC chargers. I think it's also a different story in DC. We had been bombarded with questions about, I think, old generation ABB chargers, which got end of life. ABB discontinued the support, and people ask us, can you make that EVerest? So the answer is yes, we can. But how do you get a spare part for a broken display? And I think if you need also answers to that. So yes, I think there are ways to retrofit EVerest in, but you also have to solve other questions. So it's not only EVerest. And typically you're replacing the small computer within the charger, because getting it into the existing computer is also possible, but then it gets even harder. And it's, as Holger said, I think you have not tried, I think you could have installed EVerest on the existing electronics, but for you it was cheaper and easier just to replace one board, right? For this 400 units.
Actually, maybe not quite, but the idea behind that is actually that it's easier for us to operate EVerest-based chargers. And since we're a charge point operator, we are optimizing for the assets working. And it was more attractive to actually go in and kind of do this invest than making this really not so great software work and work around its quirks. So if you look at it from a purely initial financial point of view, it was slightly more expensive to do it upfront, but it already paid off in the sense of that these devices are now much more reliable.
thanks.
But it was still significantly cheaper than just replacing the entire charger.
Yeah, though also again for operational reasons. I mean, not only, right? Like, I mean, the invest per charger was low. It was like less than a new charge point would have costed. But the bad thing would have been that if you rip out an existing charger, you rip out the existing grid connection, and getting a new grid connection in the Netherlands is pretty difficult because the grid is so overloaded, right? So it would have been like half a year per charger, and the loss of revenue alone would have made this like prohibitively expensive. But yes, also if you just look at the pure hardware cost, right? Like you could not have bought an off-the-shelf AC charger for the little amount of money we needed to invest per location.
Thanks.
It's actually
great
quite. It's actually quite interesting that you, as a CPO, also want to manage or maintain the software then for charging stations. Or so, what's the deal, or how much effort is it actually if you decide as a CPO to install EVerest and then do the whole maintenance on the firmware and all of this?
Like, I mean, that is the whole premise behind Quello, right? We believe that actually to have best-in-class charge point operations, you need to own the hardware and the software end to end, right? And like doing it through open source makes the most sense to us because it means that we're not like needing to invest in the common grounds, and that the compatibility is maximized, right? Like by using an open source project that everybody's using, the chargers will work the best because this is most broadly tested. And that's in the end what I care about as a charge point operator. So, but that was the premise, right? Like when we founded the company, it was already clear we wanted to build our own tech, and other charge point, like very few other CPOs actually did that as much as we did, I think.
Also, super short anecdote. I think when we started the Pionix company and pitched the idea of EVerest to Holger, in the very first year, he was very skeptical because he had a really great tech working. I think 1 or 2 years later, we revisited him, and then I think you realized that it's worth joining. So you're one of the early ones, but initially you also had been quite skeptical.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. Now I'm a fan.
Yeah. Also quickly shared Quello's chargers. Anything else to discuss? I have time. Any other mentionings, ideas, questions? Seems not to be the case. And since we're almost at the hour, I would like to thank you everyone for this really, really constructive, great session. I will keep the board for some more minutes alive and then try to store all of that and crunch through it. And if you want to reach me, you will find me on LinkedIn. I think probably all of you got this email somewhere from me. Otherwise, it's what is our email address? EVerest TSC. It's on the last slide here. Just write to the technical steering committee, and we can have everest-tsc@lists.lfenergy.org, and we'll invite you next year. And until then, I wish you all a great seasonal break and Happy New Year.